All right, on slide 10, there is a fancy term called proximus. Essentially, that is the core word of proximity. So, what that means is whatever's near the content is actually quite the more formal it is. So, for example, we're in a classroom. That is a much more formal environment, and therefore, proximus to the learning is core to that environment. But as we go out, we actually have an opportunity to have better understanding and better relationships because they're much more discussion based and not so formal that we can actually be much more comfortable asking questions that we may not be comfortable asking if it was in a formal environment. So that's just something to consider, especially when you're at corporate, you're trying to train new employees, and the new employees are not as comfortable as the older ones or the veteran ones who have been in the company and therefore might not be as comfortable asking questions because they can be viewed as being ignorant of their role and therefore why were they hired. So it's something to consider when you're building training, depending on who your audience is, to understand how you actually create an environment that is safe for people to ask questions and connect with everyone. All right, now we've seen the format on slide 11. Hopefully, you've seen it for those who were not in my class. If not, again, I encourage you to search online to see what this beast is about. But it's one of the easiest methods of building lesson plans. So it goes through that's why it's format, 4 quadrant process. And it's cyclical, which means it can actually start anywhere, but ideally it starts with making meaning of a content. So, for example, I want to know how to make um, pastry dough from scratch. I need to make meaning. Why am I actually even doing that in the first place? Then understand the various chemical reactions, various types of dough that's out there, whatever. Actually try it and then adapt it to, for example, I ran out of eggs or I wanted keto and don't want to use a regular flour, I want to use almond flour, things like that. So those are kind of the 4 steps that I just mentioned there. Make meaning, try to understand what the concept is, apply it, and then adapt it to whatever the situation is. You always try to create training where you can have individuals adapt to their environment because that's the challenge that we have seen with a lot of our employees. I mean, you've gone to a store, you've gone to. I am coughing my head off. I'm not even editing that. All right, so you've gone to a store wherein you've seen individuals wherein if you go out of process, they get confused. It's as simple as me going to my Loblaw store this morning to get groceries, and I gave money to the cash register person and cashier. Ha, I know you're gonna make fun of me on that one. So the cashier, and then she was looking at the money and could not calculate in her brain the change. So the change was supposed to be. So I was. It's a small amount. So for example, I gave $100 in $20 bills, and my change was supposed to be $18. So how much did I spend? And then from there, I said, well, you know what? I actually have $2. I'll just give you $2. Give me $20. And she instead gave me $22, gave me back my $2, and gave me $20. And I'm like, so why are you giving me back the money that I just gave you? So that is out of process. It is an inability to actually use a skill that you've presumed people have when they got the job, and now they can't perform it. So what are you going to do in that environment? But if you've created a training that had a lot of problem-based learning on it, a lot of uh, error management training involved, then hopefully they would have known what to do. Get your phone and start calculating. I mean, seriously. So anyway, that was quite fascinating this morning. Okay, so At the opposite end of training is feedback. And I put this slide in here because I want to give you pretty much an overview of what happens in any of our training, which presumably you've known already. So now kind of some of it is review, some of it might be new for you. And feedback is important because we need to provide feedback to our classmates, but also provide feedback as an HR employee. So part of your job, whatever it is, whether you're in HR or in any type of environment, you want to be able to provide feedback that is valuable for that individual. Even relationships require this. So because if you are not effective in the way you provide feedback, it will just be resentment and therefore much more challenging moving forward. So there are 10 steps here. You can read them, but it is important to remember when you're actually providing feedback to your classmates the moment we start posting assignments. Slide 13 talks about the idea of differentiation, what it is and what it's not. At the end of the day, I wanted to show, it looks massive, but there are two separate types of learning models coming from two different locations. So guess which one it is. Which one is coming from Canada and which one is coming from the States. And you can pretty much tell which one is which. But it's also which one was started in the traditional method and which one you expect to happen now. So anything that's differentiation is that's not is pretty much old world, pretty much very American method of how it was kind of started. The differentiation is what we would want our students to kind of focus on, as well as what you want them to kind of learn in the environment that they're at right now. Okay, that is that. And then let's see, slide 14 would be task analysis. So I'm going to put a question down below on what task analysis you should use and why for a particular scenario. I'm going to post that in and you tell me what you think. And I'll also identify what kind of task analysis method you're going to be using. So the slide shows you a couple of them, anywhere from observation to SurveyMonkey to whatever. But it's well and good to know what they are, but it's important to know which to use for what type of scenario. And that's what we're going to talk about. And that's pretty much it for this deck. There are other questions that I will post separately, but for the lecture, for our discussion for week 3, that's what you get. All right, so have a fun week answering this. Hopefully you have time for some relaxation over the weekend, and I'll post the next week's class soon. So this is the end of week 3. Bye.